This is the Extra Point Podcast. During this podcast, we will dive deeper into our Sunday teaching and share practical next steps for your faith journey. Now, let's kick off the Extra Point.
Welcome back to the Extra Point, where we dive deeper into our Sunday teaching. Today is with Pastor Scott, pretty much always, but you get to endure me as the interviewer. So sit tight. We'll get through this.
For people that don't know who you are, can you introduce yourself?
My name is Meghan Beha. I am his lovely wife. And no better episode to film with your wife than an episode about intimacy, receipts, and priorities in marriage. That is what yesterday's sermon was all about. And so we're going to dive a little bit deeper into those different points that he mentioned yesterday in the sermon. But first, let's just get a short rundown of what you talked about and what the summation of your sermon was yesterday.
So it was part 2 of a series about the things that we forget that are sabotaging our relationship in marriage. And in week 1, we talked about how we forget our roles and we forget how hard of work marriage is. And then this week we were looking at 4 more things that we forget that add to issues. And the first was we forget the centrality of intimacy in our relationships, mainly with physical intimacy, but the same could be said of emotional intimacy as well. We forget what we signed up for. We talked about how marriage is not a contract, but it's a covenant. We talked about how we forget our priorities, and that when we got married, we got a new set of priorities where God is always first, but our spouse becomes second. So any other relationships, your relationship with your friends, relationship with your kids, with your in-laws, or with mom, dad, sister, brother, it always has to come after that relationship with spouse, as well as your own desire to want to put yourself first. No, you have to come behind all of that. You have to, just as Jesus talks about, we're still talking about selflessness in marriage. And then we talked about how sometimes we forget to forget. And that's people that have been harboring grudges and all this stuff against their spouse for many, many years, and they can't get over it. And it really sits like a boulder in the middle of their relationship that until it's gotten rid of, the relationship really cannot move forward. And so we looked at those 4 things as things that we forget and that we needed to be reminded of.
Yeah. So I want to touch first on 2 of the points that you made, and that was the first one was intimacy, and the second one was your priorities.
Yeah.
Those 2 kind of are intermingled when it comes to being intentional about your intimacy with your spouse, and setting aside busyness, setting aside your kids, and then also making sure that your kids are not above your spouse in marriage, in your family, in your relationship. So what are some practical ways that we can set aside the busyness of life? And also, there's a lot of special circumstances that surround putting your kids above your spouse. Sometimes you have kids that struggle with anxiety, and so they do end up in your room in the middle of the night. And I think that we can talk a little bit about what we did with our own daughter when she started doing that, and did that for a really long time. But what are some ways that people can flip the switch on making sure that their spouse is the priority?
We talked about it in a previous week, but whatever's important to us, we schedule it. So if you want to make sure that you get time alone with your spouse, you need to make sure that you are intentional about carving that out and leaving space for that. If you want to have a weekly date night, you have to carve out time. We talked about that last week. Like we forget how hard of work marriage really is, and that's because everything else is vying for our attention, especially once you start having kids. And it's like I've talked to people, and it's like we haven't had a night alone since we had kids. It's like it's wrong. Your marriage is going to pay the price for that. It's absolutely wrong. Your kids are not your priority whatsoever. They come third. They go God, spouse, then kids. I'm not saying that they're unimportant. They just cannot become more important. And I get this idea like, well, my kid has special circumstances. And yes, I get that. And if that's you, well, then you're going to have to be even more intentional about how you get that alone time, how you get that time to be intimate with your spouse while also making sure that you take care of the needs of your family. As with everything in a sermon, there's always going to be asterisks next to every point that's made, because I don't know your specific situation, and it's impossible to preach to everybody's situation. Same thing, someone goes, well, what if I'm physically unable to be intimate anymore? Okay, well, then you're going to have to be all the more intentional about emotional intimacy and meeting each other's needs in different ways when you're in a different season. I don't have time in a given sermon to go down the path towards everybody's individual situations, so I'm painting with a broad stroke when I go, intimacy is an absolute key in your marriage. And if you're just too, able-bodied, like there's no reason why we're not intimate other than the fact we haven't prioritized it or we haven't dealt with our own junk beforehand, and that's why, or whatever it is, then you need to, then I am talking to you. Right, and the reason why the talk about intimacy comes so late into the series is that you're going to have issues with it if you haven't done the stuff that we talked about earlier. Mm-hmm. If you have not dealt with your planks from week 1, those will show up in your intimacy or your lack of intimacy. Right, there's people that because of their past trauma and things like that have major issues with physical intimacy. Mm-hmm. Well. That has to be factored in. There has to be a lot of love. There has to be a lot of grace. But there also has to be a commitment to, hey, we're going to go figure this out together. We're going to go and find therapy and counseling or whatever we have to do to get ourselves healthy for the relationship that we're in. So there's always, if you hear that and you go, well, that doesn't apply to my specific situation, well, maybe we need to have a conversation about your specific situation. But the general point is married people need to be frequently intimate, because it's a bonding agent. That's how God designed it. It's the thing that brings two people together, which is why it's also not for people that are not married, because you are not meant to be bonded to someone for a lifetime that you are not married to. And what is happening is so many people are bonded to so many different people now because we live in hookup culture. They do not realize the way that this is affecting them. And so I'm like, do not think that the rise in the sexual revolution, hookup culture, the rise in divorce, the decline of the family, as well as the rise in mental health issues is not all connected on some level. All of this, again, and we talk about this every week on the Extra Point. Every time humanity has decided that God's way is antiquated, outdated, unloving, small-minded, whatever it is, the further away we get from God's way, the more brokenness we see in the world around us. So we need to make sure that we really understand the primacy of intimacy and fight for that and to keep it as a priority. Yes, honor and love your kids. Take care of whatever special circumstances might be there. But for the vast majority of people that are listening to this sermon or this Extra Point, you got to figure out what is in the way of the intimacy in your relationship and do something about it, because it might be the very reason why you're drifting apart.
Yeah, that's good. This is just a thought that I had based off of a podcast that I listened to, and it wasn't anything relating to marriage necessarily, but it was relating to singleness, and they shared a statistic that 50% of Americans are single.
Yeah.
That has grown substantially in recent years. Do you think, and maybe this is an incorrect assumption, but I wonder if a lot of that has to do with the rise of divorce and the reasons for divorce, whether it be in America or in Christianity, in the church. What do you think about that?
I do. I think that, again, because the church, and I said this a couple of weeks ago, and I don't want to get too far into divorce because I'm doing a whole week on it coming up, but I talked about this previously that I mean, people are getting married later on in life. Less and less people are getting married. Like 53% of the American population is single. Only 47% of Americans are married. And I do think because the church has not done a good job, like marriage, if we believe as Christians, as I stated on Sunday, that it began with God and that it's God's to define the roles and the rules, we should have protected it better than what we have.
Yeah.
But among our own ranks, people who claim to be Christians, are active in churches, are divorcing at very high rates. And so therefore, because we have not set the standard of the beauty of marriage in the church, then even people outside of it are going, I don't think that I want that. I think that we would rather just live together for a little while, do our thing, and if things don't work out, nothing holding us back from just going and redoing it with somebody else.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. I was talking to a couple after church on Sunday that had both been divorced back many, many, many years ago when they were not Christians. Now that they're Christians, they have a good, godly marriage for over 30 years together. And they said, that was all of that happened before we were Christians. And he said, you say all the time, why are we ever shocked when sinners sin? It's like I'm right there with you. When we look at the issues going on in the world, I don't sit here and go, wow, the world is just such a mess. Look at all the divorce and the people that are getting married later and the people that are deciding not to have kids and yada, 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 and all of this. I don't look at that and go, what a failure of the world. I look at that and go, what a failure of the church.
Absolutely.
To hold a standard that the world could look at and go, they've got something that we do not have. We forfeited that whenever we have not held the standard for the beauty of marriage. Because I said it multiple times Sunday. The reason why God takes marriage so seriously, why as a pastor I take it so seriously, and why as a church we should take it so seriously, is it is a picture of God and His church. It's a picture of the covenant between God and His church. It's a picture of the forgiveness between God and His church. It's a picture of the need that the church has on God. It's a picture of this beautiful relationship that was never meant to be severed because, again, the Bible is all about God wanting to be with His creation when we did not hold that line. And we start going in the sexual revolution, 60s, 70s. We get into, and again, I'm not saying anything. I'm not giving a full argument for this one way or another. I'm just saying this is when you start to see the rise of contraceptives coming into play. During the sexual revolutions, you're getting into birth control and things like that. You start getting into multiple partners. You start getting into STDs. You start getting into all of this is on the rise. And the church just sat back quietly and sure, we wrote some songs about it, and there were some outspoken people, and sure, we stood in opposition to abortion and things like that. But more and more, as time has gone on, the church has not held the line the way that we ought to. And so I don't fault the world for being the world. I fault the church for not being the church.
Yeah, by and large, I think that a lot of churches, Christians in general, are really good at what they're speaking out about what they're against and not so great at speaking out about what they're for and how to effectively do it, how to effectively lead by example.
Yeah.
And so I totally agree with that. I think that the forgetting priorities, forgetting intimacy, those are extremely damaging to marriages and to your relationships. But I think even more so, and then if you add this on top of those things, not forgetting is even more damaging.
Yeah.
I have this picture in my head of what if I forgot how important sex and marriage is? What if I forgot how to align my priorities but I didn't forget what you did to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't, like, you might as well just leave now.
Yeah, you have
because you
if
can't do
you
anything
don't
right.
forget the past, like you're never going to be able to move forward into the future. Let me give a caveat. I'm not talking and we're going to talk about this coming Sunday in regards to divorce and remarriage. I'm not talking about if you're in an abusive relationship,
Yeah.
oh, please keep putting yourself back in that situation. Absolutely not. If you're in an abusive, and I mean a genuinely abusive situation, not just like somebody that challenges you and holds you accountable, that's not abuse. That's love.
Yeah.
I'm talking a genuinely abusive situation, get the heck out. Yes, you can forgive, but you do not have to stay if someone is being genuinely abusive to you. But I'm saying for the run-of-the-mill family that, he did this, she did this, but you want to keep bringing it up over and over and over, you'll never move into the future together until you just put that in the past once and for all. When Paul is writing in 1 Corinthians 13 about what love looks like, he says, love keeps no record of wrongs. So in marriage, if you want to truly have love for one another, you can't sit there with a receipt book of going, well, you did this, and you did this, and you did this. I preached in Selfish and Stupid. It might have been the first time I ever did this series. I had a sermon about how resumes always lead to resentment. And it's we have a tendency to try to build up our resume to put it against the person that we're in marriage with. Look what I've done, look what I've done, look what I've done. And then you try to build up their resume of all the stuff that they have done against you. You're guilty of this, you're guilty of this. All the while you're remembering all the good stuff that you have done and remembering all the bad stuff that they have done. So you always feel superior to them in relationship. And so you're not forgetting the things that they messed up. You're not forgetting the things where they fell short. And again, if marriage is a picture of Jesus and his church, well, did Jesus forgive the church? Yes. So what right do you have to withhold forgiveness? And I said it in a previous week. If you keep bringing it up, you didn't forgive it. If it's the thing that comes up every single time that you all are arguing, you didn't forgive it whatsoever. So you can't go, well, I have forgiven it. If you have, it will never come up again.
Yeah.
It will never come up again if you have actually forgiven it.
And I should mention also not just withholding forgiveness, but withholding intimacy, withholding who is your true priority after God. Withholding all of that makes it even worse. And I should also mention, some people are like, well, I didn't hold this against him verbally. I didn't say any of this. But when you choose to hold things against him or her in your marriage, in your mind, you remember those things in your mind and you replay that like a broken record, and you don't get off that crazy train. That also builds resentment. That also allows you to not forgive. That also allows you to withhold anything within marriage that's a
Number
priority.
4 plays into all of the other points.
Yes.
If you have not forgiven and forgotten what they have, the ways that they have let you down or wronged you, resentment and bitterness will cause you to not want to be intimate with someone.
Absolutely.
You don't want to lay down in your most vulnerable state with someone that you inherently don't trust because you have not forgiven the faults that they have made in the past. You're not going to make them a priority whenever you secretly resent them.
Yes.
You're just not going to. You're not going to feel real committed to your covenant when you are still angry at somebody. You're not going to want to play your role properly when you're still holding on to a grudge. And you're not going to want to do the hard work in marriage if you haven't forgiven them for what they did 10 years ago. All of these points play into number 5. You are never going to be able to get where you want to go in marriage if you want to continue to hold grudges and have a lack of forgiveness. And so you want to have a healthy marriage, be really quick to forgive and to move on after situations have been I'm not saying they don't need to be properly resolved.
Yes, absolutely.
If they said something that needs corrected, if something happened and there needs to be a real come to Jesus type moment conversation, you need to handle it. Because how you handle conflict in marriage will also decide the success. Like if you just sweep it under the rug, you're headed for a gigantic explosion. But if you handle conflict in a healthy manner, then you all can both learn what took place and move forward together. And the more that you learn and move forward together, the more it will impact every one of those other things that I was mentioning that we forget in relationships.
Yeah.
So number 6 unlocks all the rest of it. You could be trying, if you try all 5 of them without forgiving and hitting number 6, it's doomed to fail.
Yeah, and I should say all of those make up the last point, and all of these sermons make up something. It makes up the whole.
Yeah, you can't take one without the other.
You personally, you in your relationship with God, you in your relationship with friends, you as a single person, you in your marriage, you as someone who has been previously divorced and either single now or remarried. It all comes together, and so don't miss a single message. If this is the first time that you're tuning into the Extra Point and you want to go back and listen to the message that coincides with this episode, which is Marriage Part 2, go back and start from the beginning, which is planks, and then move forward. It's in our playlist on YouTube as The Adventures of Selfish and Stupid. Listen to all of it. Listen from start to finish, and we have our last sermon of Adventures of Selfish and Stupid coming this Sunday, and then we'll have another episode of The Extra Point happening right after that. So make sure you tune into that. Is there anything that you want to add before we wrap this up?
No, I'm looking forward to this coming Sunday. We are talking about divorce and remarriage. I'll give you a quick sneak peek that way in case you're like, I definitely don't want to hear that because, maybe you've been divorced in the past or
maybe
or
you
whatnot.
haven't.
Here's what I'm going to say. It'll feel a little provocative. The scriptures are clear. God hates divorce. But God does not hate divorced people. So show up this coming Sunday. Tune in so we can talk about what the Bible has to say, because we are committed here at Southridge Church to what the Bible has to say on these topics. Not my opinion, not my politicians' opinions, not my political party, not the culture at large, not my neighbor's opinion. I only care what the scriptures have to say, and I will bring my life into alignment with the scriptures. And so I'll say that's the little teaser. Do not make light of divorce, because God hates divorce. But he does not hate divorced people, and so there is hope.
Yeah, that's good. Well, make sure if you want to get more on the Extra Point, or if you want to follow along with our sermons, go to Southridge Online on YouTube or search Southridge Church. We have episodes that drop every Tuesday evening at 8 o'clock. We also have services live every Sunday at 9 and 11 a.m. And like and subscribe so that you can get notifications of when we go live, when new videos drop, and things like that. Thank you for such an incredible episode and such good content as we dive deeper into what God says about relationships and marriage. We will see you guys next time.
Thanks for tuning in to The Extra Point. Be sure to subscribe to the Southridge Church podcast and tune in every Wednesday for another episode of The Extra Point.